but we need more richness in this profession. We need more storytelling. And so I thought, why not me? You always want to be perfect and you can never be perfect all the time.
Welcome to Vet Life Reimagined. Our guest today, Dr. Greg Bishop, is a veterinarian by training and a cartoonist at heart. He told me that he always wants to bring things back to humor. He has the passion and the skill for finding the absurdity and the chaos of clinical life. In this episode, Greg shares how humor helps him survive the emotional roller coaster of veterinary work, how his veterinary cartoons can connect a profession that often feels isolated, and why laughter can be the best medicine. If you enjoyed this episode, a couple of episodes to check out next are the conversations with Dr. Sarah Boston and Dr. Matt Asciutto, both who blend humor in different ways in their veterinary careers. I'll link the episodes in the show notes, along with the many resources from Dr. Greg. Now, let's get to the conversation with Dr. Greg Bishop. You kind of have a unique beginning when it comes to getting into veterinary medicine. So I want to, instead of starting right off the bat with when did you know you wanted to get into veterinary medicine, I want to back up a little bit. And I'm curious to know more about your cartoon side of yourself, because I think that was a very early beginning for you. So when did you start drawing cartoons and knowing that that was a big part of something you wanted to make a part of your life?
Before I can remember. I mean, I really I grew up reading just The Far Side and Calvin and Hobbes, and I loved cartoons. And I was the third of four children. So my older brother was constantly getting in trouble. My older sister was constantly trying to help out with that. I came along. And then when I was about 6 years old, my little sister came along. So I had this, I kind of just fit in this perfect gap where I needed to just sort of stay out of the way and not cause problems. So my mom would sort of take me to stuff, set me in the hallway with a piece of paper and a pencil or a crayon. And I would just draw, for hours and hours, and I get lost in it. So I've always drawn cartoons. The first one I can remember is about a magical corn dog that fights crime. And he had a piece of radioactive bacon as a sidekick. And I did that for years and years, and then started drawing cartoons for newspapers in middle school. So I did that all through up until vet school, through college and vet school. But I've just always drawn cartoons, even if it was just little doodles. So yeah, so now recently I've been doing it, really trying to get more serious about it and talking to other cartoonists and improving the craft, and now bringing that to a veterinary audience too, and really, really trying to hone the craft and, make the best joke, the most important joke, and just entertain the veterinary audience. It's really been fun because there's no ceiling that, that I'm going to hit at some point. That'll continually get better and better, hopefully.
Yeah. And I love the fact that you are finding communities as well, because I bet people don't think about, you know, uh, a group of cartoonists that get together and talk about, best practices or what they're working on for ideas. I think it just inspires people. No matter what you're interested in, there's probably a group for it. I think about it for a podcast. There's a podcast about everything. And so there's a group of other people who are interested in that. And I think it's great to build that community and support, especially when it's not your 9 to 5 too, right? Because it's hard to necessarily find people that can relate. So I really admire you for doing that. So since we're on this topic, what has been a tip, an aha, or just a cool story that's kind of come from being involved with a community of cartoonists? I can only imagine the interesting things that would come out
Yeah.
of that.
It's so fun. My neighbor he's a nuclear engineer, but he's been submitting cartoons to the New Yorker forever. And so he got me connected with some of these other New Yorker cartoonists in Portland. And we get together about once a month and we just sit around this table at in Portland, they have all these food cart pods. So there's a dozen food carts and people hang out. So we'll get together and there's 4 or 5 of us. And we put each other's cartoons down on the table and we just sort of, in a very constructive way, we just sort of rip them apart and dissect them and pull the words and the drawings and all this stuff out. And it's my favorite part of the month. I love it so much. So I don't know about specific stories, but I just always imagine the people around us that are just sitting there reading a book or drinking a beer or something, like looking over and wondering what's going on at the table. Like these papers are coming down and somebody's saying like, no, the frog should be talking to the gerbil, or, why is the robot cutting the guy's head off? Or there's just all these crazy things. And we're laughing and throwing out ideas. And these are people that love cartoons as much as I do, and it's the only time that I feel like I get to go like really deep into it and just share and enrich, and the ideas just start like flying out left and right, and it's so fun.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. So you were talking about starting from a very early age, drawing cartoons and things. And so when you were getting towards okay, I need to start thinking about a career, was cartoonists even remotely a thought? I do know you kind of were in creative outlets going into school, but what was that journey of like, okay, I got to figure out, what I'm going to major in and do as a career?
Yeah, I spent an embarrassing long time trying to submit cartoons places that just like never went anywhere. I did this whole series that was sort of a Far Side inspired knockoff, and I sent it to all these magazines. I would print it out. I even went to like vet conferences as a student and printed out packets of it. I went to the magazines, I did this and that. It didn't really go anywhere. So cartooning is not a very lucrative career. It's really hard to make it. You just have digital media and Instagram. Basically, you just put your cartoons up there for free. So I always thought about it. I always loved it. And even there was an interview for something. I was in vet school. It was like an externship interview, and they asked me if I wasn't going to be a vet, what would I want to be? And I said a cartoonist. I love the art form so much. So I guess thinking about it as a career has been more. Now I'm thinking like, well, you can find an audience, and that's how you create something that can, you can generate some income, but you can also just like connect more with your audience now. So I think doing the veterinary cartoons has been part of that in a way, like taking it more seriously, honing the craft and getting it to people that deserve this art form for themselves. So if you think about just the numbers of things, right? There's like the New Yorker magazine has a circulation of like 1.5 million or something, right? And everybody reads it. And so if you can get a cartoon in there, that's great. And they pay pretty well, but it's really, really hard to get in there. Whereas if you think about the veterinary audience, there's what, 120,000 veterinarians in the US or something like that. And you've got allied personnel and all that, but it's a much, much smaller audience. And so there's like 3 or 4 veterinary cartoonists that take it very seriously and put material out there, but it's just a much smaller group of people that you can reach. So, I am publishing in veterinary practice news, they're paying me. So they're showing that there's value in that for the audience, which is great. But I'm just trying to like explore these different niches because you don't know, you just do it because you love it. And then you put it out there. And when people respond, it feels really great. And like, yeah, if I could turn this into more of a career, like I would, but I'm going to do it anyway. It's just, I'm doing it because I got it, because that's my brain. I have the brain of a cartoonist, and you need to make cartoons.
Well, I mean, you're describing what, small business people do is you find your niche, where's the gap, where are my interests and my talents, and you start there, and hopefully the goal is to bring in some income like you are already starting. So you are extremely unique because we don't exactly have very many veterinarians who are cartoonists. So how did the veterinary medicine side of things come into your life?
So I was always an animal kid. I grew up in San Diego, like not even a mile from the zoo, and I would be there all day, every day if I could, or would do zoo summer camp. I loved it. I was like the kid that would, everybody else is running past to go look at the tigers. And if they're not there, they run to the nesting exhibit. And I'm like, before I go look at the tigers, I'm going to read the whole informational placard, and then I'm going to like consider it. And then I'll go look patiently, and I'll consider where that's, like I just absorbed everything in there. So I didn't specifically think about veterinary medicine until later. I studied evolution and ecology in college. And when I got out, I was dabbling in some creative stuff. I actually did video editing. Again, I was doing cartoons at the time, but I was also working with animals, working in zoos, working in vet clinics. And then I started to think about like veterinary medicine specifically as I was trying to find a career. Like, how do I balance this stuff? I love the creative side, but I really want to know everything too about animals. And then I decided like, hey, veterinary medicine is going to be the way to go for me. So I'd been out of school for a few years. I went back to it, but I really came into it with the heart of like a storyteller and a creative. And so even as I was doing veterinary school, I was doing cartoons for our tiny little vet school newspaper. And then coming through like internship and finding jobs and finding work in small animal medicine mostly, there were so many things I was paying attention to that I wanted to kind of show, some of the absurdity, some of the things that I found funny. And so that's why I started to really say like, okay, can I put this into a format that speaks to a bit like the modern veterinary audience? And again, I think the response has been so great because we don't have that, right? We've got a lot of like messaging from corporate voices and academic voices. And there's some from independent practitioners, but we don't have this rich field of like veterinary art or veterinary inspired art, which just, it sounds so pompous and pretentious to say, but I'm like, but it is, and it's saying something that I think is important, even if it's, making silly jokes about whatever, poop and diarrhea. And, it just so happens to be part of our job. So yeah, I've always thought that way, and I've always wanted to bring that. And I think that enriches veterinary medicine in general. It seems to be the response so far.
Completely agree. So many questions in my head right this second. I remember listening to a podcast and you mentioned the time that maybe it really clicked that veterinary medicine was the way for you was when you were actually doing some filming at the zoo, and it was supposed to be helping, I think, their YouTube channel, and you were filming something that the veterinarian was doing. And that's kind of when it was like, oh, I like this.
Yeah.
This might be the way to go. And the comment that you made on the podcast was that there have been a couple of times in your life when you had a fire lit under you, and that was one of them. But that phrase and that comment got me thinking, and I'm curious, what are some of the other fires that have been lit under you that have played a big part in kind of what you reflect back on as part of your journey?
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, so that was one. That was like at that time I was doing an unpaid videography internship. It was actually at the Oregon Zoo. I moved up here from
Right.
California. I thought it was the coldest place in the world. I had no money. I was delivering pizzas late at night before I had a smartphone, and was constantly getting lost. And I would deliver pizzas like an hour late. Nobody would tip me, and I was like living on my friend's sofa. But during the day, I was doing this videography internship, so I'd spend 5 or 6 hours in like a video editing room, and I'd go out to the zoo and I'd film people. And yeah, I was like, just not satisfied with my life. I feel, what the heck am I doing? This is not going anywhere. And again, I was the kid, like, I just wanted to know everything about animals. And I thought at that point I had a college degree. I kind of knew a handful of things about science, but I was filming the veterinarians for like a career profile. And I just remember seeing Dr. Lisa Herenstein working at like anesthetizing a little heron, and she was taking x-rays, and like I was surrounded by all this medical equipment. I had no idea what it was. I had no idea what the tubes were and what the beeping was and all that stuff. And I just remember looking at it and going like, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do right there. I want to know everything that's going on in here. I want to know how to do that. I want to know how to help these animals. And so that really inspired me to think that I could do it. I could go to vet school. I could be a veterinarian. And I remember, when it took me a couple of years to get in, and then I was that super annoying student at the front of the class, writing everything down, raising my hand, going up after lecture, asking questions. I was such a dweeb. I went up to our epidemiology professor first year, who I thought it was a great class. I heard a lot of complaints from the rest of my classmates. And after our final exam, I went up and like shook his hand. I was like, "Thank you so much for teaching us this. This is so great. I'm just so happy." And the fire did dwindle a little bit throughout the years. I moved to the back of the classroom slowly but surely every year. But I hit these points where I'm just like, I feel a little stagnant and I want to see if I can push through to something else. So actually, just a couple of years ago, I read this book called The War of Art, not the art of war, but The War of Art, which Stephen Pressfield, are you familiar with it?
Yep. Yep.
It's amazing. And it's basically just this inspiring book that's like, hey, if you hear this voice calling to you to move to a higher sphere, don't let anything stand in your way. This is your life. If you've got the creative spark, then feed it. So about 2 years ago, I read that book and I went, yeah, I've been a vet for 10 years and I have seen a lot of stuff and I'm seeing the same thing repeated over and over again from these, academia, corporate stuff. And that stuff's good. And we need that, but we need more richness in this profession. We need more storytelling. And so I thought, why not me? I've been doing this forever. So that led to me pitching a graphic novel to a publishing company that's in publication right now. So that should be out, in the next year or so. And also starting this blog where I just sort of ramble on whatever I'm thinking about that week and really pushing these veterinary cartoons. And all of this stuff is, it's been that fire to get this stuff out there. And, I've been doing it just for a couple of years now, really seriously, but it's been really, really well received. Like my colleagues, just locally and then on LinkedIn and wherever have been so encouraging of it because I mean, to me, it just seems like there's a great need for this stuff. We don't get this, this balance of, okay, here's our profession. And then here's here's what it means. Here's how to incorporate that into almost like the lived experience of it. And I'm like, I'm going to treat my life right now as an opportunity to sort of document it in the way that I know how. I don't think I'm particularly skilled in any branch of medicine, but I really love the storytelling and I take that as a serious discipline. And I think it's important. And again, so far, I'm not getting a bunch of people being like, shut up, Greg. I'm getting people like, thank you for putting this stuff out there and for communicating it.
Yeah, I was reading some of your blogs, and one, I'll speak for me personally. I think I have a short attention span, so anything that I read is very hard, but when it is in a humorous, realistic tone, it's a lot easier and I get engaged, I just finished a book. This is probably gonna sound so weird, but it's written by Mike Rowe, from
Yeah.
Dirty Job. It's his mom, is a multiple time bestselling author, and her most recent book was Oh No, Not the Home, as in like the old folk home.
True.
And it is just her stories because she's such a good storyteller and she's humorous. And I just love, I like, hopefully I'm way far away from being in the home, but I just love her. She's just so funny. And so I can lean into that kind of thing because, like I said, it's humorous, but it's also real too. So, like, listening to you talk about an average day or something like that, I can sit there and read your blog about that. And I hope that people appreciate that. We have a lot of conversations in our profession trying to maintain face or, all of those things that it's hard to talk about. But if we were more open to talking about reality, but also having that humorous side, I think it would make it so much easier to kind of I don't know, just go through it instead of just bottling it up. I think that makes it all worse instead of just leaning into it and supporting in that fashion. And, I even want to go back to your time at vet school because I know you were part of a group that made funny videos. And like you said, you were already writing for the student paper. And so, that is an extremely challenging time, that initial, vet school time. So I'm curious, how did you see and participate in that humorous side, getting you through vet school? Like, speak to that
Yeah.
because I'm curious from that perspective too. Because I think if we start early, all the better going throughout our career.
Yeah, I mean, it just happened so naturally. There was a group of people that like to laugh, and we got together and made like a video for one of the early events for the first year class. And I had a background in video editing, so I was like, I'm gonna do this well. We're gonna have special effects, and we're gonna have original music. We're gonna really, really go for it. And again, the response was great. The students laughed, the faculty came and enjoyed it. And then we just had a group of people that really wanted to make more of those. And so we would find any opportunity we could to make a video. And then we'd get the lecture hall, and we'd get the whole student body would come down, and we'd put on like one of our music videos. And it just was the best. It was so fun that I was just always looking for an opportunity to do it. And it made everything else easier. When we were doing this stuff, people would look at we're filming, like, we did so many silly things. We had like a group of students that did dance choreography. And so we made a music video about parasites called Worm Burden. And we had like these students dancing in the middle of the campus, doing their choreographed dancing, and like, people be walking by, like doing round, like residents would be walking by on their rounds and stuff, and they just see us like dancing, and we're filming it. We're like, we know this looks ridiculous, but we're gonna put it all together. And as we were laughing and doing that, it was just fun. Like we weren't worried about anything. And that's really one of the things about humor that is so, so powerful, is that, when you're laughing, you literally cannot be fearful. You can't be angry and upset. It's like an involuntary relaxation that happens. You're releasing dopamine, you're releasing endorphins. And so that humor, bringing that to vet school it wasn't necessarily conscious, but it was just like, I was just drawn to that. And there were a couple other people that were really drawn to that. We all worked together and made these things. It was great. And then now, doing the cartoons is the same thing. I'm like, well, look, on the one hand, it's a hard job. I still do clinical stuff, and I do a lot of emergency stuff, and I'll have shifts where I just had one last week where I put down, 4 animals, and it could have been very dark. It could have been very depressing. It could have, sort of fed into all of the mental health problems that we have. But I've been trying to be so intentional about bringing humor to this, not to dismiss it, and not to say, none of this stuff is important and hard, but to say, like, we can see this in a different way that is light and that is good and that is helpful. And, I've been going deep into like the humor research on what it does physiologically, and just how it works. And it literally makes things seem easier than they are, which is, if you have to do something hard, wouldn't you just rather it feel easier than it actually is? And so, yeah, that's kind of the whole mentality and the whole goal right now.
On that note, I think you've also looked at humor and in the medical field specifically. So what have you seen in the research?
It's extraordinary. I mean, everything that is hard about medicine, I would argue humor can improve. So, number one is just the communication aspect, just between, so if we're talking human medicine, between healthcare provider and patient, using humor, right? Use it correctly, use it wisely, and use it in the right moments, but it improves patient satisfaction. So just what is it like to be a patient going through that experience? Well, using humor makes that better. You get better compliance for everything, right? So even with us, you got the visit, right? If you're not an inpatient, you're getting the consultation and then you're leaving, but then all the care at home is on you. Well, using humor improves compliance, and this has been studied. You get fewer malpractice claims. Basically, everybody feels better about the interaction, and the medicine actually improves. And this is really well established, that humor can do that. And yeah, it's got all these physiological benefits, but shockingly, like, there's not a lot of research in actually using it. If it were a drug, right, and it's gonna improve compliance, it's gonna improve satisfaction, it's gonna fewer malpractice claims. there's studies where like it worked as well as pharmaceutical analgesics, right? So like in some hospitals, they have medical clowns. Have you ever heard of this as a profession?
Yes, is it kinda like they made a movie that,
Patch Adams was a physician.
Patch Adams.
Yeah. But there
Yeah,
was a
yeah,
profession called medical
yeah,
clowns, and they go to the
yeah.
hospital and they just go sit with patients and they entertain it, and they're brilliant at it, right? They're not like you would think like, oh, it's a little cringy and there's clowns and it's gonna be scary. But they're not. They come in, they talk to the patients, they get a sense of what's going on, and then they entertain them. So in pediatric hospitals, there's a study where they use medical clowns versus some pharmaceutical analgesics for all sorts of stuff, right? So post-operative analgesia, but also just like anxiety and all this stuff. It works just as well. And it's like, of course it does. You know, if I could tell you a joke and you can laugh, you're going to release your own endorphins. You know, you don't need anything else. You don't need the risk of side effects and all this stuff. So it's this amazingly beautiful gift that you can give just through the words that come out or the visual actions that you make. And it's like this incredibly potent thing that we can use and we can learn too. So that was the other thing. It's like you have all these benefits, but just now we're just starting to get some literature on, you know, how do you help physicians or healthcare providers or veterinarians? How do you help them learn how to access humor and learn how to utilize it, right? Because a lot of the thinking is you got to be so reductionist, rigid, and structured, and then you lose sight of the patient or the client in our case. And how do you tap into the humorous moments in order to get all those benefits while still practicing good medicine? But I mean, to me, it's all part of the art of medicine. It's all part of that practice.
Well, you went to my next question naturally, and that was and funny enough, the cartoon that just recently popped up on LinkedIn that you had done was something about the surgeon comes and talks to the clients and he says, "I'm a very serious surgeon, as you can see with my child shoes," or something like that. And so, my question was going to be like, how do you balance this? Medicine is serious, but then there's also we're talking about the benefits of humor. Maybe if you could share through an example that you've done or something, but I'm sure that's the question people are
Yeah.
thinking.
Yeah, it's so I just did a workshop here locally on this subject. So I did this deep dive into the literature and a lot of just the theory, right? Because you know we're science nerds. We want to know how does this work, right? If I'm going to implement this, I want it backed by good science. So the overall thing is using humor should never compromise your client's, trust in your honesty and your competence. And those are things that you have to establish, right? So Patch Adams didn't come in. It was like, hey, I'm just going to make you laugh and that'll be it. The whole goal was I know you so well and I know what you want so well because I'm listening actively and I'm empathetic and you can trust me. And there are moments where you're concerned about something that I know you don't necessarily need to be concerned about, right? So there's different ways to help with that, but I think about it like a miscalibration, right? The exam room is my home turf, and I have clients come into it, and they come in freaked out or anxious about X, Y, or Z problem, right? And it's my job to say, hey, your anxiety is up here about whatever issue it is. My anxiety is down here because I don't think it's a problem. And I could spend a lot of time explaining to you, hey, you don't need to worry about this. But if I come across as dismissive or like I don't care, then trust gets eroded and then the anxiety might actually go up. So the goal with humor is to say, okay, we have a miscalibration here. We have a perceptual asymmetry. I always like that because I'm like, it's just our perception. So if I'm going to bring you down to here, I need to do it in a way that genuinely makes you feel okay. You need to give up this anxiety. So the example I use, because it's easy to visualize, is like a dog that comes in where the client is worried about an older dog that's worried about cloudiness in their eyes, right? So they'll come in, they'll notice that, they'll think that Bella is going blind or something like that. And I go in and I look and I do my ophthalmoscope exam and I see, hey, this is just nuclear sclerosis. It's not really affecting their vision. Dogs aren't really primarily visual to begin with. So I can put them at ease. Hey, this is, I notice your concern. it's actually not, they're not going blind. There's no worry about that. And I'll explain it very quickly. And then I'll say, I don't think this is a big concern. I just wouldn't let them drive at night. And that's, it's like a silly little joke, but when I deliver it like that to clients, generally they get it right away. And if they laugh, I can tell like, hey, this concern that they came in with, boom, it's no longer there, because the laugh is a genuine response to realizing that it's not as serious as they thought it was. It reduces the temperature on these serious things. So to me, those are the best places to use humor, is when you can relax a client's anxieties about that. And then when you trigger that laugh, I look at them, I go, that was a genuine laugh. We've got some endorphins, we got some dopamine. It doesn't have to be huge, but just tapping into that really, really, really reinforces the value of you as a competent individual who's there to help, who's listening carefully, right? Because I don't say, oh, don't worry about that at all. Like I explain it, I tell them, I set them up, and then I move on from there. And I do this even in like really tense situations. I do this. So I talk about like euthanasia. I do a lot of euthanasias in the ER. And those are one of the moments where clients are in such distress, or can be in such distress, that humor can be incredibly powerful in those moments. So, you want to be very careful, obviously. But one of the things I always think about is clients, when they come in and they're euthanizing an animal, a lot of times there's just a lot of guilt. There's a lot of intense feelings of, did I do something wrong, or am I giving up? Because the people are anthropomorphizing their animals, and they would think, if I was in this position, I would feel terrible, right? Because my family's bringing me to kill me, and like, that's not the situation at all. We know as animal people, the animals aren't thinking about that at all. They don't fear their own mortality. And so I talk to people about that. And I say, like, I understand that this is really hard, and this is tough. I just want you to know that your pet is not thinking about this in the same way that you are. That your pet, as we can both see, is suffering. And so this is a really kind, humane thing. Your pet is not worrying about the fact that they'll never get to go see the Eiffel Tower, or never write their great American novel, or something like that. And that joke, a lot of times, like, that brings them, it immediately makes it clear to them, hey, this is a dog or a cat that is just loving and happy to be in the family, but is so clearly suffering that I put all this extra stuff onto their thinking that didn't need to be there to begin with. So I find that like really, really powerful. You can get them to smile and laugh during euthanasia, realize they're doing it, a beautiful, loving act that should be celebrated, and bring in all the sadness and embrace all the sadness, but also like smile. Cause boy, the story of your pet that you're now releasing from suffering is a wonderful one. And just because this is the last, chapter in it, doesn't mean that we can't appreciate all of that and take it in a heartfelt but loving way that has some laughs too. I just, again, it's part of the richness of our interaction with people, and in that human animal bond, where we can really say like, hey, this is good to do. This is something we need to be celebrating and enjoying, and have that sense of mirth about the whole experience.
Yeah, and it makes me think too that because we work with animals, animals just have this natural joy to them. Like there is that ability to pull that in as well as like we can tease about them driving or
Yeah.
those kinds of things that I think helps with our particular profession as too. And I can't also help but to also think about it more on a vet to vet side of things too, or not necessarily vet to vet, but the veterinary community, because this is an audience you're really targeting. This has come up a couple times, so I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. Maybe I'm just completely oblivious, but I've had multiple people recently comment about dark humor in the veterinary medicine, like again, on the more internal side of things. And I'm curious your perspective because you do not come across as like dark humor to me. So, what are your thoughts about that? What do you observe on that part of humor in veterinary medicine?
Yeah. I think I'm extremely dark, actually. You-
Oh, all right. Okay.
Well,
Maybe I'm just
no,
curious. I just think it's all light and fun.
not so. So the way that I mean it is, the times that I feel most horrible in veterinary medicine are, I'll be honest, it's usually it's seen like a 2-year-old bulldog with terrible aspiration pneumonia, dying in an oxygen kettle, and the owners just are refuse to face reality. So like, to me, it's such a horrible thing that has happened, but I've put myself in the position to be there, right? I feel like myself, the team, we are the backstop against animal suffering, and we're there. This is happening. We've sworn an oath to be there and to limit that and to help out as much as possible. So I don't mean I'm dark in the sense that like I'm celebrating how horrible it is, but I'm like, well, it's horrible and I'm there, and I'm gonna try to find the humor in that, or I'm going to try to find the absurdity in that and share that with my colleagues that are seeing the same thing. So, I do have cartoons about that, about bulldogs and all the absurdity there. I would so much rather find the laughter there and find you can have gallows humor or dark humor that's like, nihilistic, or it's sort of like nothing matters and who cares and it's horrible. But you can also have it that's in a way that's like, hey, we're here in this dark place and let's laugh about it. So, and this, like, my situation is nothing like this, but you have people like in concentration camps in the Holocaust that are talking about humor, and they're saying like, no, we needed humor to get us through those moments. It would have been so horribly depressing without that. So I look at the veterinary profession and it doesn't seem like it's in a great place. Most of my colleagues are they're not really happy. They're not really thriving. I know there's people that are doing that, but the ones that I know well have just been hammered and beaten down and are slogging through. And I have such love for the community and the profession that I think, what can I do? Again, I'm not a brilliant criticalist. I'm not so smart with all these other things, but I've sort of trained my brain, and I'm just naturally drawn to finding the way to make it funny. And I guess the one thing I want to say is I always want to look at my own work as being a little hopeful. So even if it's dark, even if I'm making jokes about, I have a joke about like doing CPR, right? The dog is dead and the team's doing CPR, and hey, can you go ask the owner how many medical dramas they watch, just to get a sense of like, how hard is this conversation going to be? But to me, it's like, we're here. This has happened. This is reality, right? And I tell myself that too. I'm like, I say, hey, I'm talking about this stuff because I'm seeing it, but I always want to leave people feeling a little bit better about the situation, not because it's not happening and it's not tragic, but just because it's like with the euthanasia. I want clients to leave with euthanasia with a story of something beautiful and something happy and this wonderful connection, rather than everything is horrible, right? We have so much of that already. I don't want to contribute to that at all. I just want to say, hey, yeah, things are dark, but let's try to make it good, and let's try to have our brains enjoy our lives. If we're going to be going through our lives anyway, let's have it be fun. I just want things to be fun.
Yeah, I think you explained that well, and where I guess I was trying to understand. And because, I mean, like you said, you do ER work, which has a lot of crazy things come through. I think I heard you talk about your internship after vet school. I think the way some of the things I was hearing, it sounded like a hazing experience.
Yes.
Like you've experienced some very rough things in being a veterinarian. And I think most of us can relate because this is not an easy career. And so, I mean, feel free to comment more on that. But is that what you think helps you make this a more sustainable career? Now, of course, you're able to work on these other projects that bring a lot of joy to you too. But I mean, you still, I hope you still like working in veterinary medicine. So, what do you think helps sustain you to take a very hard job and keep doing it every day?
Yeah, it's all of the things that we think about, that we hear about. A lot of it's just reminding myself that if I wasn't there's not that many other people that are, there's, it's so hard to find coverage for these things that I'm like, if I'm not there, there's nobody there filling my shoes. So it's not, it's not like I'm stealing jobs from 12 other qualified people that would be doing a better job than me. Like, it's just a reminder that I'm experienced, I'm trained, I'm gonna make mistakes, but I really can be there to be helpful and to kind of shake off that imposter syndrome, right? It's like, hey, they let me into school, they gave me the degree. I did it's not like I cheated. I went through and I did everything and like here I am doing my best. So it's that reminder, and it sounds so silly to kind of put it like that, but really thinking about it as I don't have to be perfect and and things will get bad. There will be times that are just bad. I think my internship honestly was was instructive in the sense that I came into it so eager and so like I'll go full bore on everything. And I just hit this breaking point where, I did this overnight shift and like collapsed and the next morning because I'm so exhausted. It was crazy. But it kind of let me know like, hey, number one, be careful, right? Because you're not invincible, and you're gonna hit these points where you have to make hard choices, and you don't have to be perfect, and that's so different from when you're in school, right? And like people literally you're around just the smartest people you've ever met, and they're all getting 98% on their exams, and they're crazy, and then you go crash into reality, and you're like, no, wait a second. Now doing a good job means talking to these people who are literally under the influence of some intoxicant and trying to figure out some sort of plan that works and like what's it going to cost, like it's nuts. And if you beat yourself up about it, it can be really horrible. But if you approach it like, you know what, I'm going to do my best, then it makes it a little bit better. And also just really really like forgiving yourself for outcomes that are not going well, approaching it from like hey, I'm trying, I'm doing my best, and having that simultaneous confidence and humility. It's tough. It takes a lot of maturity. And, but again, I just think about it like, hey, we're oath takers. We're here. We are the backstop against all these horrors. And sometimes the best possible outcome is not the academic textbook level. Sometimes the best possible outcome is like, hey, you talk to this client and you just compromised in a way that is just a little bit better than what they wanted to do. They wanted to do this really terrible thing. And you were like, you spent the time to really just bring them up a little bit. Well, it's not here, but it's slightly better. And sometimes slightly better is as good as you can get. So I don't know. I feel like, you have the snot kicked out of you enough, you eventually, you kind of get to that point and best you can do.
Well, I hope we can do a little bit of cushioning before it's complete snot level, but
Yeah.
which I'm hoping you're bringing to people is realizing that sooner. And I was the generation where we worked really hard and we knew it was going to be a challenge, but people still said, I still remember this from vet school, that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I really think that that is a gift to the people who are coming through vet school. Yes, it selects for very intelligent people, but these are people who really care. And the article that you wrote about, yeah, you can trust your vet or something like that, it really is, I think that if we're showing up to work caring and listening, and yes, we happen to have the knowledge, that we can bring to it, but I really do think that is ultimately the best thing that we can bring to work every day.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's also helpful to think about it almost like a resource, because if you dump all of your care into everything, I do think that's how people do burn out a lot of the times is they, the other saying, right? The other side of that coin is you can't care more than they do or something like that, right?
Yep.
And I think
Yep, I heard that one.
that was a paradigm shift for me is to stop thinking about this as like, I need to get the owners to do what I want. It's like, I need to treat the owners like a complete equal, and we are a team, and it's like a marriage for, when this BCPR is going on, there's no you versus me. There's like a us, and we are going to make this work for your animal. and that really, really changes the dynamic because like if it's a barn cat that's coming in with a nisocoria and I'm like, all right, let me give you a list of 5 clinics that can do an MRI around here. They're like, there's no point, right? Then I'm just wasting time. I'm actually losing trust if I'm doing that. So it's really, really, it sounds so silly, but sometimes I'm like, I'm going to work with the owner to, I'm going to try to like psychologically manipulate them in a way that they're happy about to help the animal as much as possible. Like they're my puppet to work on the patient, but they have to be happy about it. I got to work with them and I got to like really establish that trust and be okay with what's going on. Cause I'm not going home with them. I'm not taking care of the animal when they leave. I need to make sure that like we are on solid ground working together and that we both feel good about it. And yeah, there's times where I lose it and I pull my hair out with clients and there's times where clients lose it on me, but it's a really different approach to look at it as complete equals on this. You know, I take care of the medicine side, you take care of the paying your bill and bringing the animal in and, you know, giving the medication when you go home side and we're going to really, really gel on this. That is how you provide the best possible medicine for animals in my.
Yes, thank you for bringing that in because yeah, it's understanding the reality of the situation and what's possible and being okay with
Yeah.
it at the end of the day. Um, I'm curious, just with all of the cartoons that you've done so far, was there one like a topic specifically that really seemed to resonate with people? One, and then maybe was there one that resonated and maybe surprised you that it resonated so much?
Yeah. So I posted one that it was labeled veterinary nightmares and it's veterinarian sort of like at night, like 2 in the morning, like tossing and turning. And then they're having a dream of themselves performing surgery, but they have a scalpel over about to make their incision, but it's a balloon animal. Um,
Yes.
And that one, like, really so I posted that with some sort of statistics that were pretty bad about veterinary mental health, and that one, like, really, really took off. To me, that was a very personal one because I do emergency surgeries, and I have terrible surgery anxiety, right? I'm constantly battling this fear of causing harm. So I don't know, I thought about that. I'm like, my brain has to be working overtime to bring the scalpel down, and with surgery, you're causing harm. You're disrupting the tissue. You're creating a wound in order to make things better. I find that a lot. I find that I'm always balancing the practice of medicine. You know, is this going to create harm? Is this antibiotic that I'm prescribing? Is this really necessary? Or is this going to make it worse? And you always want to, you always want to be perfect and you can never be perfect all the time. So that was like a very personal one to share because I was just like, this is how it feels when I do this. And it really, really connected. And it was like, oh, people do have a lot of anxiety about this job. It's hard to be there wielding that power and to be thinking, am I making a mistake? And I think unfortunately, a lot of the messaging that we get is that we're making lots of mistakes all the time. You know, you shouldn't be doing this. You shouldn't be doing this. Top 10 mistakes in surgery. It's hard when you're thinking I'm making mistakes all the time, you freeze up and you're indecisive and a lot of times you end up causing harm just from overthinking it. So yeah, I mean, that was my experience and I shared that. And I think a lot of those where I really reveal some vulnerability about, and even in writing too, I've written some stuff where I'm like, okay, the recover guidelines, I have to go have this calm conversation about CPR in 90 seconds, right? If I have a code that comes in, I got 90 seconds to explain it. And then I just done the training and I had a 13-year-old Cavalier and congestive heart failure come in that it was the owner's son and she had brought it in. And so there was all this personal detail. And then the dog had this special importance to the family. And I was like running back and forth between the lobby, cause I don't want to do CPR to an animal that's not going to make it. Like the team doesn't want to do it. So I was like, cool. 90 seconds. You got 90 seconds to figure all this out and communicate it and get it clear. Like it's impossible. Right. So I wrote this thing that was like my experience of doing that and feeling like it was just this impossible moment. but I've been told that I should be doing it, so I'm not doing it. Should I feel bad? And then I got to bat that down and like all these things, moving pieces. And I wrote this thing, and that really connected with people too. And people were saying, "Hey, that's the experience that I have too." So my hope is that, I share these things. The message is not, "Hey, it's horrible." The message is that it's kind of funny, right? It's kind of absurd that we're in these moments together, and that we're all doing it, and because we love animals, because we love helping, and we do want to help. And if that makes it feel more connected, if that makes a colleague feel more connected to me or to one of their other colleagues, then that's a good thing, right? Because you don't find that stuff elsewhere. You don't find the like, hey, your veterinarian is like having existential crises as they're trying to coordinate CPR with you, and you're like, I don't know. I have that stuff. I think it's important to share. It certainly helps to get it off my chest. And when it connects with somebody, when it makes a comment, hey, that really was the same experience I had. It's amazing to recognize that for me. It really makes it worth going through that process.
I kind of feel like we came back to community again. And because I think that is what you're building. It's one image. And yes, you have some great writing that goes with it. And I think really expounds upon it. But that image can really connect us in our feelings, that vulnerability. I mean, I think I made career decisions because of my surgeries. I think, like, what can I do that I never have to feel like this in surgery? And I still have those tendencies of worrying about causing harm, even though it's not surgery, right? So yeah, that image also, I very distinctly remember that one as well. And think part of that is that building of an internal community of being able to say, I see you, or like, I feel seen by your ability to paint this in a way that is so true, and yet we can kind of chuckle at, I think that's it. I think that is very beautiful what you're doing.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. Well, I will make sure to list all the different things that people can find you. I know you've helped illustrate children's books. Yeah, I can point them to your not a blog, what is it called? A
We'll call it a blog.
It's a
Yeah.
blog. Okay. The
I wrote it for like a year before I realized it was a blog. And then it was so dumb. I'm like, well, I'm writing something once a week, and it's on the web. So
webs
we'll just call it a blog.
online. Yes, I will point them that direction. But I always love to end with, what is something you are really grateful for right now?
Oh my gosh. I am genuinely very grateful for people that have been just my colleagues. I mean, I have local colleagues here that I've gotten to know through work. I do relief work, so I work in different practices, and I've made friends, and I feel like I'm a little bit of an outsider doing relief, and not being from this area, and not having a ton of colleagues that I went to school with here. But people have been so welcoming and so supportive. And I work in one clinic that they've cut out my cartoons from Veterinary Practice News and posted it on their whiteboard. And just anybody that likes the stuff that I'm putting out there, because I started this just because I was late. These things were overflowing, and I had to get them out. I did want to share them, but I even had to tell myself, even if nobody looks and nobody appreciates it, they're still important to do. So just the fact that anybody has paid attention, has appreciated it, has shared it, or connected with me to say thank you. It's really, yeah, it's wonderful. It's beautiful to have that connection, and to know that there are colleagues who really are feeling the same way about it, and happy that I'm putting stuff out.